You all see that?
Yep, we can see it. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, all, and welcome to our final residential truck traffic work group meeting. I want to thank you for all being a part of this very educational process that we've gone through here. Most of you all have seen the draft of the final report. We have the majority of our work group members with us this morning. I want to remind everybody that it's being recorded, and if you're not speaking, if you could stay on mute, that would help us get through this process. We have a full agenda, but I don't think we're going to have to go until 10:30. The point of today is primarily for us to review the final report and for us to all vote on the recommendations that we've discussed over the several months throughout this process, so that we can meet our deadline of submitting our report to the legislature. So what we have here this morning is the final report. Hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to review the report and review the recommendations. Did everyone get a copy? Everyone good? Or does anybody need a copy before we start to go through it? All right. Looks like everyone received a copy of the report and has had an opportunity to review it. Before we actually get started, I want to thank Mia and Joe for taking the time to put this report together. And I actually want to thank the work group staff as well for the hard work that they've done in terms of making sure that we had the information that we needed in order to put together. Mia, if you don't mind, even though we have the agenda up, if you would bring the report up.
Sorry, you cut out for 1 second there. Did you ask me to bring the report up?
Yes, please.
Okay, I can do that.
Can you all hear me okay? Okay, good.
I think it was a me problem. I think I had just a little internet trouble, but now I'm all good.
Perfect. All right, perfect. So our first agenda item is to review the final report itself. I've had a good opportunity to go through it and highlight some things. I think it's important for us to talk about what each recommendation actually says, to just bring us back to what our goals were in particular. The first part of the report itself was the introduction. We did some background associated with the report to remind everybody what the charges were and what was outlined in the state legislation for us to do. And then we went directly into the recommendations that were put forth by this committee. So I think it's important for us to go to each recommendation. I won't read each recommendation. I have it highlighted so that we can understand what we said in the recommendation portion of it. But I definitely want to have conversation here because we vote on this after we go through the report itself. So recommendation 1A was for us to adopt the route map created by this committee as Baltimore County's official truck route map, and to utilize that map to promote behavior change. And it outlines, we were given 2 charges related to the map. The work group found no significant issues with the county's existing framework. Instead of embarking on a comprehensive overhaul of the current restricted routes, the work group recommends a focus on enhanced enforcement and clear communication restrictions, which includes the installation of a vehicle height monitoring detailed in later sections, is also recommended as the primary method for enhancement enforcement. The work group is also recommending that the county build out the provided map in a way that guides vehicle operators away from areas of concern by identifying the preferred routes. You all know we had a lot of discussion around the preferred routes that the drivers should be using. The work group also recommends making this completed map of restricted routes and the work group suggested preferred routes, the official truck route map for Baltimore County. Did anybody have any questions or concerns with recommendation 1A? All right, hearing none. We will go to recommendation 1B. The work group support staff have created a GIS version of our recommended map, making this map easily locatable on our county's website and encouraging the county to make the daily public available in a manner that allows the map to utilize it in real-time GPS format by vehicle operators. The support staff has also advised that these goals can be accomplished by uploading the map data to the Baltimore County Government Open Data Portal, which also gives a second option for persons using the map. The work group also encourages that DPW&T, Bureau of Traffic Engineering and Transportation Planning, frequently consults with the department's GIS staff and encourages the county's data portal to be updated and accurate on a regular basis. That would be recommendation 1B. We're all together on recommendation 1B?
DeAndrea, this is Doug. My only concern is there's really, I think what we're trying to say here is we want the data to be consumable in the GPS units that the organizations use in their trucks and the like. That's really not so much a GPS format as it is a GIS format. The roads are displayed in what we commonly refer to as a GPS, but really it's GIS in the background. GPS is just giving you your position. So I'm not sure if that language needs to be updated or not, but certainly within the GIS community, we would be a little confused about what that is.
Okay, so it may be helpful for us to know what that language should be. Should we just take GPS format out?
Yes, I would.
Okay. All right, we will make that adjustment. Anything else on 1B? All right, hearing none. Recommendation 1C was to work with industry representatives to build awareness of the route map among vehicle operators. The overall goal of establishing a vehicle height monitoring program was to reduce high volume of truck traffic in residential areas through the promotion of behavior change among vehicle operators. The work group recommends continued collaboration between Baltimore County and the trucking industry representatives to build awareness of the newly adopted route map. Did anyone think we needed to add anything additional to 1C?
No, the only thing I wanted, this is Captain Brown. I did talk to Baltimore City a few weeks ago, and this is a huge part that I guess to make this successful needs to be focused on and not lost in the shuffle, because he said they educate, and they have relationships, and that's what's going to make it work without hurting people's feelings and kind of making sure everybody's on the same page. So yeah, this is a big part. So I think it reads fine.
Thanks, Captain Brown. And Lewis doesn't know this yet, but in sitting in this seat as acting director, I've gotten a lot of questions and concerns about things such as truck traffic and such as no parking for the trucks in certain areas. So I am looking at, and I was going to save Lewis until after we finish this truck trafficking group to start to have some regular meetings with the industry to talk about some of the concerns that we've seen coming from council and building that working relationship and that partnership with Lewis's group so that we can be on the same page and achieve some of the same goals that the council is trying to get us to achieve. So I think we'll just roll this up into that regular meeting that I would like to have.
Yep.
We can have a continuous conversation about making sure it fits for the roads and the trucking industry as well.
We look forward to having those continued discussions, DeAndrea. So thank you.
No problem. All right, so section 2 was strictly about the camera locations, and in particular, recommendation 2A was pretty much where we would place the vehicle height monitoring systems and the designated locations, and utilize special circumstances at Wise Avenue and Benson Avenue locations, and to continue to study the issues at the Dundalk Avenue and Silas Point Road traffic circle. The work group in particular identified 7 restricted roadways that were ideal for enforcement. And we are recommending that 2 camera placements per location should be there so that we can capture traffic coming from both directions. And then recommendation 2A also lists out the 7 locations that we made recommendations for the cameras. Are we all still in agreement about the 7 locations?
I just have one question. Is the Solars Point location number 5, does that read correctly? I mean, I thought one camera was supposed to be placed where it enters by Hollybird. Is that right, or am I wrong on that one? I'm trying to think. Does this read correctly? Somebody that's familiar with the area and this problem.
Is Pete on? He gave some good feedback on that one. Mia, do you remember what the note said on that one?
Is Ron Metzger on the call? He would probably know this personally.
So
No.
which number location are you talking about?
5.
Okay.
Solars Point.
Okay, yeah, I think so. Solars Point was the one where we had like the 2 thoughts about where to place it. There was like 2 potential locations, and I think we decided to go with the fork of the road that was between Solars Point and Merritt, because I think there was a problem area below that, and we were also targeting, like, I don't know if you can see my map here, but like this whole bottom region. I think the 5, 6, 7 are all attempts to get trucks out of that, like the region south of that as well. So I think it was like a higher up stopping point, because there isn't really any industrial areas around beneath 5.
So
like it's mostly residential. I think that's was my impression of it.
So is there one on the fork and then one at Solars and Merritt? Is that what I'm reading?
Mm-hmm.
Because Solars and Merritt is a truck route. I mean, I'm sorry, it is. There's not. I mean, you can drive large trucks there, because I think it's. I think it's. So I guess at the end of the day, it's going to be catching trucks that come that way from the split or the fork, which I think mainly people come that direction and they don't go towards Dundalk Avenue. Is that accurate?
We would have to go back and look at the notes of the conversation.
Yeah, Joel, do you have those handy with you? I see that Joel's
Yeah,
now back in there.
I am trying to pull up the map here. I mean so the alternative one, I mean, I think we were looking at either doing it at the fork or closer to
So I believe if you come,
Merritt and Dunaway, but
the Solars and Merritt, you can actually drive a truck here without being cited. I mean, that was the idea. If you come from Solars from Holabird and go all the way through to Merritt, that's okay. But if you cut through from Holabird and you turn right on Solars and then follow Solars around and then take your shortcut to get to back to Solars and Merritt, that's where the problem comes into play.
Joel, do you
That
want me
makes
to make you a presenter so you can?
Or, you know,
what
I'm
you're
sorry.
saying?
When you go down Holabird and you turn right on Dalevale, Dalevale at the fork becomes Solars. But if you go down Dalevale all the way past Solars where the fork is to Merritt, that is okay to drive a truck. It's just Solars between, I guess, Solars where the fork is, and then backing up at Solars where it starts at Holabird. That's our two issues. So basically, Solars and Merritt is, I'm not sure that's the place for the camera because that's,
yeah,
you
Mia,
can drive a
can you
truck
make
there.
can you make me the presenter because I have the map up.
Yep.
Unless I'm reading it wrong, maybe, I don't know.
You should be the presenter now, Joel.
Okay. Not that one, but this one. Here we go. Is everybody seeing that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I
So
see
the camera.
I see Google Maps. Did you want the maps with the restrictions on them?
Yeah. How about now?
Yeah.
Now.
Okay.
Yep.
So the camera location we're talking about is here, right? So if we're talking about them coming all the way from Holabird up here, why is this not cooperating?
Because it's Monday morning
Yeah.
and it's early.
Yeah. So if we're saying Holabird is all the way up here, and they're coming down to Dunaway, that shouldn't be an issue if we're talking about a camera location right here. So I guess Sellers Point and Merritt Boulevard. Yeah, so I'm not sure where which routes you're talking about, Captain Brown, where that would capture somebody doing something that's not illegal. Oh, okay, sorry. So there's an intersection of Sellers right here. So this is not the intersection we're talking about. We're talking about this intersection down here. So maybe that's where it's getting confusing.
Yeah. Did the way that we explain it not maybe reflect that location? Is that the disconnect?
Because we said it's placed on either side of Silas Point Road, south of the fork of Silas Point Road and Merritt Boulevard. So should we change the way we say it? Any recommendations on verbiage?
I'm having trouble understanding this map. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I can't see where I'm talking about. If you could direct me where I am, because it's even hard to see when you point stuff out what I'm looking at.
Sorry. So right, zoom out a little. So here's Sellers Point coming down from Holabird, which is up here. If this would cooperate, there we go. So Holabird is up here, and so we're talking about a camera placement right here, which this one where my mouse traveling here. That's Sellers Point, and this fork is with Merritt Boulevard. So we're talking about a spot right here.
And I think the reasoning on that was because there's no legal way for them to get down there because they would have had to travel down a restricted portion of either one of those roadways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good, thanks.
So you good with the verbiage, Captain Brown?
That's fine, yes.
Okay. All right, so we will leave 5 as is.
Joel, do you want to put the report back up now that you're the? Oh, actually, never mind. I am still the presenter. I can do it. Never mind.
All right, so we all agree on the 7 locations, so we will move to recommendation 2B, which was at the identified locations, utilize best practices in signage, language, and placement to ensure the restricted routes with camera enforcement are clearly identified. The committee recommends clarity in signage, language, and placement to clearly notify vehicle operators of the height. The restricted route signs at the chosen locations should have a section on the bottom of the sign that clearly reads photo enforced. So we agreed that in these locations, we're going to put signage out so that the truckers will know that there's cameras in those locations. With that, we move to section 3 of the recommendations, which was specifically about the limit on the number of cameras that we use. So recommendation number 3, enact legislation allowing Baltimore County to operate no more than 7 vehicle height monitoring cameras at a single time. The work group recommended those 7 recommended roadways for the monitoring enforcement, which created a total of 14 potential camera placements. And we just went over those camera locations. And then recommendation number 4 was exempt certain vehicles from vehicle height monitoring enforcement and implement a review process similar to the current process for speed cameras and red light cameras. And we, the work group recommend the following vehicles be exempt: school buses, public transit vehicles, emergency vehicles, trash and recycling trucks, utility, home energy vehicles, household good moving companies. One other thing I wanted to point out here, the work group recommends the police department utilize a similar manual review process for the vehicles flagged by the vehicle height monitoring system and ensure that the above mentioned vehicle categories are built into the list of reasons a citation can be manually rejected. Are we all good with that recommendation?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I talked about people about possibly adding is, I mean, certain tow trucks, but I mean, and we could have our own internal exemptions for that, but I don't really want to make up things. There's certain tow trucks that are large as well. Is that included in any of these? I don't think it is.
No, it's not.
So does everybody make sense if that, but again, I don't know how to best say it. I don't know.
Is it a particular size of tow truck? Because it's not all tow trucks, right? Or is it?
So it'd have to be 12 feet, right, at most of the locations to pierce even a trigger on the system, except for at the Benson Avenue location where it'd be set at 10. Right, so if you're talking about a tow truck that is pulling a car, which is typically what you would anticipate in a residential area, I don't believe that those would pierce the system based on the height. Right, we're not talking about the heavy duty wreckers, which shouldn't be in a residential area anyway, because they wouldn't have a commercial vehicle ideally in the area to have to pull. So, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe this is thinking too much on this. Maybe I'd tell you what, leave the list the way it is. But I do have one more question, Deandra. Where the section 3 where it talks about 7 cameras and possibly and limited to 7 and 14 total, I guess, placements. Are we going to make any recommendations of how to expand it? Or that's going to be something that's not for this group to decide? If for instance there was complaints, you know what, we left this road out, we should have included this, and now it's too late because we have just this amount of cameras. Is the group making any recommendation on how to expand it? And the reason I ask that is because now we're dealing with it limiting of our speed cameras, and there's some talk of how to best expand that, because it's the complaints are unbelievable with just the amount of things we have going on in the county, and there's different processes for different programs. And are we making any recommendations on whether or not we would go beyond to 7 or 14, how that should happen, or no?
I believe what happens is this is just the initial review of how to set up the program. And then once the program comes within the agency, I think that is based on policy, how it's expanded at that point.
That's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and if I could just add real quick to that. So the number of cameras will be set in the Baltimore County ordinance that ultimately passes, right, by the county council, but the locations should not be ideally in that legislation, right? So in the city, you know, we established the prime locations to start with. They're limited to 6 cameras, but they have altered the locations where they use them through a public notice requirement that is mandated in the state law. So as long as they meet the public notice requirement, you know, they can put them honestly anywhere they want. They just have to push out that notification, and they're limited to 6 cameras based on the ordinance that they passed at the city council level. So in this scenario, you know, you'd have the 7, but you could certainly go beyond the 14 through the notification requirements that the state law allows for. So you can, you know, if you find another problem area.
So
Right.
I would think that would require coordination, because DPW&T would be responsible for putting up the signage that says photo enforced at the additional location. But I would think that would be something we could work out with you, Captain Brown, when we put a policy in place about how we're going to carry this out. What do you think?
Right, and to his point, there's a difference between locations and to actually put cameras at the location. So, and what we found is some locations, I mean, I don't want to say they're not as bad, but things are added to mitigate the problem, like speed bumps or what have you. So they're not as viable as a location. So locations can be added easily. It's just the amount of cameras that sometimes are added. But you're right, it's probably not for this group to decide. It's more of a, once this gets into effect, to work out some of those details.
Okay. All righty. I think we were at section 5. Is that correct? Section 5, the citation process. So recommendation 5A was to create a citation appeals process mimicking what is currently in place. State legislation asked this work group to make recommendations related to the development and implementation of a process for a vehicle owner to easily contest erroneous issued citations without necessary of a court hearing. The work group recommends building out this existing program to incorporate the management of vehicle height citation appeals. We go through a review of what that actually means in setting up the vehicle height program. I mean, the appeal program. Okay. And then recommendation 5B is to ensure that the citation process includes procedures for citation appeals and liability transfers that are easy for vehicle operators and owners to utilize. The work group recommended the county take the necessary steps to ensure that the process of appealing a citation is simple and accessible for vehicle owners. The appeals process should be made easy to find on the county's website, and the physical citation should include clear directions to that website. In addition, the work group recommended that the website include examples of the documentation that a vehicle operator could provide. The other important point here was the framework should also apply for the process of transferring the liability, which we found companies don't want to be responsible for. They want to transfer the liability to the actual driver of the vehicle. Okay. Recommendation 5C was move the speed camera citation review request from review request form to an online form and create similar online forms for the vehicle height monitoring citation review process and the transfer process, liability transfer process. The work group also recommends taking steps to streamline the management of those processes. Specifically, should the county carry out the work group recommendations to fold management of the vehicle height citation appeals into the existing ombudsman program, the work group does not want to create a further administrative burden through the continuation of outdated online policies. Therefore, the work group recommended that the Office of Information Technology assist with the ombudsman program in the creation of the online form. We talked about this a little bit when we had a presentation done by the current ombudsman program manager. All right, everybody good with the recommendations from section 5? All right, moving on to section 6, the signage. Recommendation 6A was for us to update Baltimore County signage related to restricted truck routes to note that the routes are restricted to vehicles over 5 tons, replacing the current 3/4 of a ton signage. I particularly want to point this one out because we had some back and forth on this one. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as it relates to this one. So I'm gonna go into a little bit more detail on this one just because this is one that I don't think was unanimous by the work group. So Baltimore County's current restricted routes contain signage indicating that no vehicles that weigh over 3/4 of a ton may use the roadway as a through route. It was said that these signs are problematic because they do not accurately represent what Baltimore County enforces at these locations. Note that some work group members argued that the existing signage sends an unclear message to vehicle operators and presents an inconsistency in the enforcement of the process. As such, a majority of the work group members recommended the county change the signage at restricted routes locations from 3/4 of a ton to 5 tons. We did note in the report that this was not a unanimous recommendation by the work group. Opposition to this recommendation came out of the concern that the updated signage would create confusion amongst constituents. And without context, it could appear that the county has created a much less restrictive framework, although the majority work group felt that the advantage of this recommendation outweighed the potential concerns. Are we okay with the way 6A was framed? All right, coming on down. 6B, create a public information campaign to convey the reason for the change from 3/4 ton signage to 5 ton signage. The work group recognizes the concern associated with the recommended change from 3/4 of a ton to 5 ton signage. In order to ensure the constituents receive proper context on the reason for the change, the work group is recommended a coordinated public outreach effort on the matter. And that's to help with some of the confusion around it. So ideally, we are saying that it will be led by the county executive's office. They have the communications office more so, in coordination with DPW&T, the police departments, and members of the Baltimore County, so that we have a coordinated effort in alerting the residents of the changes that we are suggesting be made. Okay. Recommendation 6C, use the replacement of the existing signage as an opportunity for the county to assess the signage placement and needs at each restricted roadway. The work group recommended to evaluate existing signage and identify the locations where the signage can be improved. And while recommendation 6A covers the concept of evaluating existing signage, in a broad sense, the work group felt it was also important to examine locations on an individual level. And we are suggesting that the county move forward with these signage replacement recommendations put forth in 6A. And we are recommending that DPW&T use each signage placement site visit as an opportunity to assess placement and visibility of signage at each location. It's just another way to say we're going to go out, recommend DPW&T go out and look at where we have all this signage, which is good because we are in the process also of trying to identify all the signage that we have out there and put it in the GIS system as well. So not a problem. It's a heavy lift because we have so many signs, but we're in the process of trying to do identify all of our signs anyway. So recommendation 6D, work to address existing signage issues that were identified by the work group. The work group in particular has flagged 2 specific locations in Southeast Baltimore where local stakeholders have already cited specific signage concerns. And we've also flagged the need for better signage at Trade Point Atlantic. And we've also flagged the need for better signage at Belclair Road through the intersection with Dundalk Avenue. We are recommending a thorough examination of these 2 locations to address the signage concerns that are contributing to the issue of residential truck traffic under 6D. All right, moving on to our last recommendation, which was not a part of what the council asked us to review, but we added a resource section here. Ensure that the county agencies are provided the budgetary resources necessary to carry out the work group recommendations. And again, even though the state legislation did not task us with this, this topic was frequently discussed by the work group, and carrying out the above recommendations will create new costs for several county agencies, including but not limited to the procurement of the vehicle height monitoring system, the placement of the existing signage, procurement of the additional signage, the staffing associated with the vehicle height monitoring program, within DPW&T, the police department, and the Office of Budget and Finance. So we are recommending that the county executive and the county council take these needs into consideration when we are building the county's annual budget in the upcoming fiscal year, because this doesn't happen by accident. It requires resources and people. So we are asking them to take the budget into consideration as these recommendations move forward. So in closing, what happens now is that we turn this report over to the county executive and the county council, and They will collaboratively draft, pass, and enact the required local legislation needed to establish and implement a vehicle height monitoring program. So that is the report that we will be putting forward with the 7 recommendations included. Having gone over the 7 recommendations, we're now at the point of the agenda to vote on the recommendations that we're all putting forward. So before we vote, is there any discussion on the recommendations? Hearing none, I want to make sure that we are all get a chance to voice our vote on the recommendations. So all in favor of the recommendations? You can unmute yourself.
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor as well. Thank you for all the work you guys put into this.
I'm in favor as well.
Here, most are in favor. Here's the important. Anyone not in favor of the recommendations that we're putting forward? That's that 5-second rule. Sounds like we are all in favor of the recommendations that we're putting forward. With that, I want to thank you all for your work that you've done on this. We could not have accomplished this goal of completing this without all of you all's diligence and attending all of these meetings on Fridays, to say the least, and helping us to review this process and come up with great recommendations to put before the council. So I'll open up the floor to the work group members if there's any discussion that you all would like to have before we adjourn our meeting.
Deandra, I'm sorry. I just, is there a possible timeline as to what they're looking for to enact and all that? Because I don't know if they have anything in line. Because the reason I asked that is because I'm going to be asked. In addition, preparations have to be made for me if that is going to just some, because we have some other things. We have like the school bus cameras starting probably next year. So this is something else. I just wanted to kind of see whether or not there was any predetermined things that they're trying to shoot for with target dates.
Are you aware of any steps besides us submitting our report?
No, I think the legislative effort, which the local legislation cannot be enacted before October 1st. I think we're going to be looking to move forward with that piece in the fall, but that's sort of its own prerequisite before anything moves forward. I don't think there is a specific timeline in mind yet for what happens after passed legislation. I think that is going to be sort of a meeting of the minds of many of the people on this work group to tell us what is realistic. So while we're not going to pause much before we move forward with the legislation, I think it's still a TBD on the actual program itself. That will depend on what the various departments tell us is realistic.
We don't even have really a budget yet, or it's not in the FY22 budget, so yeah, consideration.
All right, thank you. I didn't know if there's anybody else talking, but thanks for the answer.
Any questions or discussion from any of the other work group members?
Hey, I'll just jump in, DeAndrea. Thank you, and Joel and Doug and me, just the whole group, for all of the effort that I know has been put into this. I know it was a long process, even starting with the legislation. Obviously, I know that county council members can put legislation forth with anything they want in it. But as long as they are focused on the recommendations of the work group and the legislation that is introduced, we'd certainly look to come out and support that. legislative effort. So thank you for that. And we really do appreciate you guys putting forward what I think is a very fair and reasonable effort to try and protect legitimate operators and really, rein in some of the illegal traffic you guys have experienced. So thank you.
Thank you, Louis. We appreciate it.
The only thing I'd like to say is I second what Joel just said, or I'm sorry, Louis just said. And I really appreciate all the help that everybody's given me on this end of town. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Merson. We appreciate it. I have to tell you, I was kicking and screaming coming chairing this group. I was like, no, but it has actually been an education, for me and for the department, to see where we can step up and do some other things to help with a chronic concern that we seem to be having out here. So it's been educational for me and fulfilling, to say the least. Yeah.
I think you've done a great job. And I think everybody on the panel has done a great job. I really appreciate the help. I can use all the help I can get down here. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much. I would be remiss if I did not thank the work group staff and the department support staff that have really carried the bucket of water on this from beginning to end in terms of all the hours they put in outside of their regular duties to make sure that we had the information we need and the presentations from all of the different departments that were able to come and bring us information to help us with our decision-making process. So with that, thank you all for your hard work on this committee. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to working with you all again in some other capacity soon. So thank you all, and with that, we'll close it out. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Mia. You've done a fabulous job.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thanks,
you to everybody here.
Thank you, Emil.
Guys,
Thank you,
have a good
DeAndrea, for your leadership.